I want to thank Mothers Out Front and Green Newton and 315 Mass Newton Road for sponsoring this event. I want to thank the candidates for open seats 11, Amy Sangiolo and Alex Jablon, and District 12, Bill Humphrey, Rick Lipoff and Greg Schwartz for joining us tonight. Thank you for your time. Leadership on Beacon Hill is essential to address the climate crisis. We do what we can in Newton, but if we don't have the backing and the legislation on Beacon Hill, we won't get very far. So this is a very important issue, and I'm glad you're all here. And this is leading up to the primary, Democratic primary on September 3rd. And at that primary, we'll choose District 11 and District 12, who will compete in the full election in November. So this is the right time and the right place, and I'm sorry for the heat, but you know where that's coming from. So I want to introduce Debbie Statopoulos, I got it right, who will be the moderator for the evening.
Thanks, everybody. I'm going to give you the lay of the land in terms of what we're doing. First of all, we are recording this, so if you just be aware that we will be trying to post it for people who aren't able to make it this evening. There are 4 questions. The candidates were given the questions in advance. We gave them a time limit of 3 minutes per question. Ellen in the front row has some time cards and we'll be giving them notice when there's 1 minute remaining and 30 seconds remaining and when the 3 minutes is over, and we'll be thanking them at that time and moving on to the next candidate. We are going to rotate who is answering which question first, second, third, fourth, fifth. And at the end, after the 4 questions, each candidate is going to be given 1 minute for some wrap-up comments. We're hoping that that allows us to finish in the time that we have allotted for this. So thanks again for everybody for coming. And I'm going to start with the first question. And Bill Humphrey will be starting as the first person to answer. What experience, values, and skills will you bring to the responsibility of combating the climate crisis as a state legislator, and where do you feel you would be most effective?
Thank you. So I'm City Councilor Bill Humphrey. I ran for public office originally because I'm a young person who's been thinking about the climate emergency since I was in high school, and I wanted to bring that sense of urgency to the elected office and hopefully another elected office soon. The climate emergency is really our #1 challenge at every level of government right now. It poses an existential threat to much of humanity, but right here we're seeing flooding and heat waves taking their toll. We also know that the migration crisis is closely linked to global warming's effects in developing nations around the world as well. The good news is that if we pursue a Green New Deal for a just economic transition, we can address a long list of other challenges facing our society at the same time. These new clean energy projects and retrofits and transportation network changes, these create good-paying jobs for our friends in labor, they clean up our air and water for better health outcomes, and they help address our housing crisis and congestion problems as well. The economic activity from this transition can also keep our society from stagnating, but that won't just be growth from more consumption or disaster exploitation. We can have a better future for everyone by working on our climate goals. The key to making this future possible is, and this is the way that I approach serving in elected office, is to get as much of the public involved as possible in the process instead of trying to rely on top-down solutions from the insiders already in power. And that's the approach I always take when it comes to environmental policy action. Bring on that grassroots pressure. And we did that just now over the past few weeks when working to save the electrification ordinance here in Newton. And we passed my version instead of the version that was adopted briefly at the prior meeting, which would have exempted kind of the entire point of the 10 Communities pilot. And your flood of grassroots emails to save the day made councilors think hard about their earlier vote. And that's also an approach that I used previously in Delaware, where I went to college when I was the College Democrats president. We refused endorsements or support to any candidate who supported fracking in the Delaware River Basin. And my specialization, I would say, is in figuring how to work around the process obstacles and to turn the process to our advantage with help from the public at large. The Massachusetts House of Representatives does not need more warm bodies to vote yes when something comes to a vote. They need someone who is actually going to try and shape and mobilize public opinion and pressure to push climate proposals to the top of the priority list, whether it's the biggest bill that everyone's watching or the smallest technical change in energy production regulation that's going to have a ripple effect. That's why I've been endorsed in this race by Mass Alliance, Progressive Massachusetts, and several labor unions. I'm also the former political chair of Mass Sierra Club, and I've known some of these representatives since before they got elected. I've been doing this kind of grassroots pressure campaign since I was old enough to vote.
Thank you.
This is my bread and butter. Thank
That's
you.
your time. Thank you. Rick Lipoff, you're next.
Thank you. So the question is, what experience, values, and skills do I bring? Correct?
Correct.
And where do I feel I'm most effective? Okay, what I bring is over 2 decades, 22 years of experience representing the entire city at large, and for 4 years, chair of land use, which permitting and land use is extremely important to the climate question because housing, transportation, and climate are intrinsically linked, as we know. I've owned a real estate valuation company, valuation and consulting, for 33 years, and I take that experience along with land use and the 22 years to the State House to bring complete cooperation in an effort to get things done, which is what I've been known to do on the council. I've been interested in educating myself to the climate crisis, especially where it intersects with housing. Public and private partnerships have been something that I've focused on. Kessler Woods, the Edison land that was up for sale, I helped partner with the mayor and with other councilors, but I led the way, it was in my ward, to save 20 acres of open space. And we know that saving waterways and open space is another key to saving our climate. We saved 20 acres, partnered, got affordable housing. It was the first time, I think it was the first time we used CPA money. If I go to the State House, when I go to the State House, I'm going to push quite hard with my real estate background. Everything that is on the table right now, which was a $4 billion bill, now it's a $6 billion bond bill, housing bond bill, that has so many things in it that is going to combine with transportation to help save climate. Transportation-oriented developments that we are focusing on, the push for MBTA communities. I was a leader. I not only wanted to do MBTA, I wanted VCOD. I wanted to do more. But in the end, we got MBTA, we got the money, well, not the money, but the opportunity to have Auburndale available to get money to fix that station in the future. Government experience, housing experience, 22 years of getting things done. I'd like to go to the State House and represent you all, and climate is one of the foremost things that I'll be looking at with my experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Greg Schwartz is next.
Thank you, Peter and Denise and Green Newton and all the organizations for this forum. Climate change is hugely important. In fact, as has been mentioned, global warming is an existential threat to all of us. With just a modest amount of sea rise, Boston will be underwater. That would totally disrupt our daily lives, our economy, and our whole existence here on the coast. So you asked what skills and experiences we bring. There are 3 that I would highlight for me. 1, I've been a primary care physician for more than 20 years. As a result, I've been trained to take a scientific approach, fact-based approach to complex problems with multiple systems, to work with colleagues, to ask experts for their advice to get the best possible outcomes for my patients. This is an approach that I want to bring to the State House because I think it's also the way that you should make good policy. Second experience I would bring is from the city council. Like my two competitors, I served on the city council. I did for 8 years. In those years, I saw the importance of working together with people with differing views, being able to build consensus and get good policy done. And I am ready and excited to do so at the state level, where people do come at these issues at different stages, and you need to be able to work with all of them. And the third experience set that I bring is I actually went to law school and got a JD. You may say, why with a medical degree did he do that? Well, I had worked for a congressman as a legislative assistant, as well as for a healthcare advocacy group against the tobacco companies. And I had seen the importance and the value of having legal training and an understanding of how the legal principles get implemented in law to make effective and targeted policy changes and achieve our ends. So those are the experiences and skills that I would bring. I want to share that I'm very proud and honored that Ruth Balzer has chosen to endorse me. She has been a champion of these issues, and I will try my very, very best to fill her big shoes and be a champion just like she has been at the State House on the environment and climate change. Thank you.
Thank you. Alex Dublon.
It's probably a better way of doing it. Hey everyone, my name is Alex Schwan. I'm running in the 11th district. So when I first read this question, it talks about experiences, but it also talks about values, and that's kind of where I want to start at. I went to Canada Camp Frankie Day, which was run out of the West Suburban YMCA right here in Newton. Their core values are something that I strongly identify with. The first is caring. I care about the city, I care about this Commonwealth, the planet, and its people. Climate change is a #1 issue, as it's been discussed so far, and I truly care about the city and care about you. And I would bring that to work every day. The second is responsibility. I think that it's a pretty big onus that has been put on us. We really need to fight for this 20 years ago. This is a 5-alarm fire right now, as evidenced by the weather this week and what we've seen in the last 3 years. Now there's honesty and transparency. We'll get a little bit more on that later, but I'm a man of my word. When I say that I will take the T to work every day instead of driving in, you bet your bottom dollar that I'll be doing that. And respect. I excel with people skills, I love meeting new people. And in the state legislature, coalitions are essential. It's getting anything done. We may have a super majority, but there are a lot of different coalitions, and to get anything done, you really have to go on. The last is Tikkun Olam. I was raised Jewish, and I want to make the world a better place for everyone. Well, let's talk experience. So I've managed budgets upwards of $120 million. I help make those tough decisions where which projects got funding and which ones don't. I've helped negotiate contracts with the government directly. I'm currently an auditor, so I provide oversight as my background. I've done a lot of work within anti-corruption. I really love doing it, and I think that we need more oversight within the state legislature. And as well as serve on the Financial Audit Advisory. So we don't... Apologies. So when it comes down to it, I identify on the progressive wing of the party, and we don't have a lot of progressives that have a pure financial background. The best way to enact progressive change, in my opinion, is through money. If you look at the budget process right now, which the Senate is currently going through, there are a lot of environmental priorities that are on there, but there are also a lot that are left out. So, who do you want in the ring fighting for those dollars? I think it's the person that has the experience with budgets and has the experience with numbers. Thank you.
Thank you. Amy Sangiolo.
Thank you. Thank you for hosting this. Thank you to 358 and others up front, and also bring. I will bring my 30 years of advocacy experience in the environment, my demonstrated effectiveness of getting things done through the legislative process, and my years of experience in delivering excellent constituent services. I have a demonstrated commitment to working inclusively with stakeholders through community engagement, and will continue to provide good communication and transparency as your next state rep. As an advocate, I worked for the Sierra Club Legal Defense Fund on Endangered Species Act and water law. I worked at the Container Recycling Institute and tracked bottle bills legislation throughout the country. At the National Wildlife Federation, I lobbied the Senate on Capitol Hill for the successful passage of Senator John Kerry's National Flood Insurance Reform Act. As a city councilor who served for 20 years, I co-sponsored the tree preservation ordinance with the late Mike Whitloff to protect our trees from development. I was an early supporter of the Community Preservation Act. I advocated to preserve open space and acquire open space, and I supported the plastic bag ban and leaf blower ordinances. As a private citizen, I created a foundation to provide grant funding to environmental and cultural organizations in and around Newton. These projects included the Ordway Park Project, the Marty Sendon Path, Green Decades Solar Energy Project, the Conservation Commission's Environmental Science Program. We also funded a study to improve water circulation at Purgatory Cove and a cost estimate to create bike and pedestrian paths along the Charles River. In addition, I've also advocated with the Newton Public Schools to participate in food rescue resources, and I'm currently working with tree advocates to protect Newton trees and help public health advocates to ban PFAS products. It's clear that we need bold and aggressive action to combat the climate crisis, and we need a fierce, passionate, and effective advocate at the State House with a proven record of commitment to the environment. I pledge to be a leader on Baldwin Screen. Thank you.
Now, you can keep the mic. We're going to take a breath and give everybody a chance to inhale and exhale before we do the next question, so that people can clear their minds to listen for the next set of information that everybody's going to give us. Okay, question number 2. What should be done about the gas distribution system? Amy Sangiolo.
So 2 things: safely stop the wasteful spending on the old system and facilitate transition off of gas. Gas companies are replacing and installing new gas lines, spending millions of ratepayer dollars on infrastructure that will soon become obsolete in the near future, resulting in stranded assets that ratepayers and taxpayers will be paying for decades. The Newton Energy Commissioners, I think Peter and Denise, did a study and a review of National Grid's gas enhancement program, which was intended to replace the gas leaks and leak-prone pipes throughout the city. What they found was eye-opening, that $24 million was spent on replacing gas lines, whereas only $125,000 was used to repair leaks. The Department of Public Utilities issued an order on the future of gas, and at the end of last year, recognizing the harmful effects of methane and affirming that the Commonwealth must and will transition the building sector off of gas through electrification. They also rejected renewable natural gas and hydrogen as being too risky. They called for minimizing additional investments in pipeline and distribution mains. They said there is no need for sprawling gas system for backup heat, and they called on utilities to minimize stranded assets. So what can we do to stop wasteful spending on the old system? First, we need to give the Department of Public Works the authority to prohibit expansion of the system to new territories. We need to prohibit the siting board from permitting large expansions of existing gas systems. We have to require the gas companies to develop, implement, and update annual plans to decommission their systems so that they can do it safely, quickly, and equitably. And we need to require that gas companies during a transition repair and not replace these gas lines. We also need to facilitate the transition of gas. So how do we do that? Well, first we need to make sure that gas companies provide customers with heat via renewable, non-polluting energy and expedite neighborhood transition. We need to incentivize network geothermal, like Framingham is doing with Eversource and Lowell is doing with National Grid. and we must expand the Mass Save program to make sure that they provide services for our underserved communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill Humphrey is next. Bill Humphrey. And thanks for holding the mic up so that we can hear you. The recording is taking it from the sound system.
Thank you. So one of the most profound challenges that communities in Massachusetts are facing right now is what to do with the aging and leaking and dangerous legacy gas infrastructure. And right now this decision isn't even up to the communities for the most part, or the public, because so much of it is controlled by the Department of Public Utilities at the state level. The good news is that the DPU, as Councilor Sangiolo just mentioned, issued a future of gas analysis last year that concluded there is no viable path forward for gas infrastructure. Repairing and replacing this infrastructure is cost prohibitive, and there's just no safety or clean energy future that involves continued reliance on natural gas. The DPU has called on the legislature to begin taking action to operationalize these recommendations and begin the transition off natural gas, and that's where at least two of us are going to come in next year. I ran for the City Council in 2019 on a platform that included saying no to all new natural gas infrastructure in our city, and I voted against every granted location for expanded gas infrastructure instead of urgently needed repairs, which again goes to the point that Councilor Sangiolo mentioned in terms of the ratio of where they're putting the money for ratepayers and so forth, because it's to their financial advantage to do expansion, not repair, which is very bad for all of us. And we do face this huge stranded assets problem, what to do from here. And I know there's various proposals on what to do with the gas grid in the future after we're not running natural gas through it. Some of these include networks, geothermal, and that kind of thing. And I really look forward to digging into these options with the experts and then making a case with the public to move forward decisively on this. But the bottom line is that we have to say it's beyond time to keep fossil fuels in the ground in the first place and not in our grid. That includes siting reform, that includes saying no to those big transmission pipelines. And it's also time to set a deadline to turn off the gas. And we need to do what needs to be done to meet that deadline. That means helping businesses and ordinary people to make that transition off of fossil fuels. I think most people want to, so it's a question of making sure they have the resources and ability. And we know what we need to do for a clean, green future, and natural gas has no role in that future. As with many of the problems that we're facing in the Commonwealth right now, it's time to stop admiring the scale and length of the list of problems and start actually working on them, not to keep sending stuff to study, right? It's obviously important to educate folks in the legislature who aren't up on all this stuff in the way that we are, but a lot of them do know about this stuff, and it's time to get moving with the public's help to really apply the pressure that's necessary to make some serious changes here. Thank you.
Thank you. Rick LeBoeuf.
Thank you. You're going to start hearing some redundancy because we're all talking about the same thing. I have to say that it's time to stop wasting money on expanding. I absolutely agree. We need to fix all of these leaks that we have in our district and stop wasting money on expansion. I agree with the deadline. We have got to get off gas. I am sitting here. Anybody else smell oil? We are sitting here sweating, and I can smell the oil residue, and it's just apropos, isn't it? We need to force the utilities to spend their money differently. We need to make sure that Roberto, as we move forward with our commercial buildings, isn't just for the 10 communities. I've heard from people constantly that we are wasting our time going to residential electrification because they say to me that the generation source is gas and oil, and it's not renewables. They're absolutely right, and that's why we have to focus on changing the source of our energy. We've got to go with wind, we've got to go with solar, we have got to change how we create that energy. One of the most important things that I think is going on is the EFSB, the Energy Facilities Siting Board. In order to make this system work, to get off fossil fuels, we have to have siting and permitting that doesn't take 3 years. This commission is going to make sure that siting and permitting for large projects can happen in 15 months, and for smaller projects, 1 month. We need clean storage systems, we need new transmission lines, they will be establishing, things aren't getting done at the State House. They're establishing an Office of Environmental Justice and Equity, which is extremely important for underserved communities that have been rolled over, the Merle Baptist community, so many others, and an Office of Public Participation for the community to give input into the siting and permitting of new generation. We will not be able to go completely electric unless we solve the beginning process. We need, as I said, we need to protect people from price volatility. We need to reduce the risks of disaster. What happened in Methuen can happen anywhere, and that's another reason to get off gas. The world is on fire. This is about our children. This is about our children. This is about what's coming next. 10 years ago, people rolled their eyes and said, this is down the road. This is year after year what we're going through. It's unbelievable. You wake up to fires, you wake up to hurricanes, you wake up to floods daily. It is time to get off fossil fuels.
Thank you. Greg Schwartz.
Thank you, and as Rick said, there is some redundancy here, but let's just state the obvious, as it's already been stated. Gas is a problem, okay? And it's not the bridge to clean energy that it was thought to be. It harms our climate, it kills our trees, and it hurts human health. So we need to get off of the gas addiction, and we need to help people move away from it. It also explodes, like it did in Merrimack Valley, and it costs lots to maintain, which is not a good use of our funds. And it contributes to emissions. So obviously, with more than half of Massachusetts households using gas for heat, that's adding to our emissions. Over half of our electricity also comes from gas, so that is also a reason that we need to get off gas and fossil fuels. And how do we do this? There are 3 main ways. One is simply to ban gas in new construction. Newton and Brookline have done a great job. We need to take this statewide. We need to ban gas in new construction of schools, municipal buildings, commercial and residential properties. We need to expand it to large renovations so that every time that there's an opportunity to put in electric infrastructure at a competitive cost, that there's no reason to put in gas, that we can demand it. Second, we have to make it easy to move to gas-free appliances, heating, and cooling. The current incentives that are provided through Mass Save are extremely bureaucratically difficult to access. I can tell you I'm still waiting for my rebate from my induction stove that I got last year. And it's not that I'm unable to read the fine print or be an advocate for myself. It's simply very challenging. And Mass Save is made up of billions of dollars from the ratepayers. And it may surprise you, it's not a nonprofit working without any incentives. It's actually a tool of the, or at least an arm of the utilities. We need to change that. We need to move it so that its incentives are aligned, so that it can provide the incentives that we need for our population to get off of gas. And finally, we need to address the issue that everybody has mentioned, Amy, Bill, and Rick. The idea of putting more money in the ground to pay for new lines is absolutely insane. We are on track to pay $40 billion, which is 2 big digs, and instead that money should be spent on moving people to heat pumps and off of gas and fossil fuels. So there's a number of good bills. I'll be supporting them. My time is up.
Thank you. Alice DeWall.
Yeah, so I completely agree. I think that, you know, as someone with a finance background, just burning money up doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. I think that we really need to move towards more green initiatives. I definitely support banning additional or expanded fossil fuel infrastructure. except for to repair existing leaks for safety or for climate mitigation. Quite frankly, the leaks are unacceptable. It's been, especially over the last few years, we've seen improvements in the identification time, but it's still too slow. We definitely need to bring more attention to identifying and then fixing these leaks as soon as possible. It is a short-term safety concern. It is a long-term climate and health concern. And it needs to happen more quickly and it needs to be more efficient. As we transition, we got to make sure that, I think it was said previously, permitting reform. It's something that's being talked about a lot at the federal level, but definitely something that needs to be talked about at the state level. As Greg said, it takes way too long, and especially, if you look in the past, as we move into new technologies, Massachusetts has typically been a bit slow to respond and put up the structure in place in order to address these issues. We definitely need more long-term planning. I think, Bill said it, we need a plan towards decommissioning and we need a shutdown. Now, things happen, we can kick the can down the road, but it seems like we've been doing a lot of kicking the can down the road the last couple of decades. The time is now, and we really need to fight this crisis head on. It's, I said something about honesty earlier. It's not going to be fun, but, it's a lot less fun is what's going to happen if we do that. So I think we absolutely need to go full steam ahead. Again, it's going to be difficult, but it is absolutely going to be worth it to save our planet and to save this economy.
All right, we'll take another minute a few seconds to take another few deep breaths. Clear our minds for the third question. Give yourself a little break. Fan yourself with anything in your mind. All right. This is question 3, and Alex Devlon was going to start. As state representative, what can you do to help communities meet the Commonwealth's emission reduction goals in the building and transportation sectors?
So, there's plenty of things that we can do, and sorry for everyone being stuck with me going twice or more. I'm hearing my voice again. But we really need, 5 to 7 times more solar than we have right now to meet goals. So some of the things that I would be looking at is incentives. The finance guy, they work. They have to be targeted correctly, but they do work. Cost is a big barrier to adoption, and that's definitely something that we can help with, both by making it more accessible, expanding eligibility, and providing resources for a broader kind of general public information campaign about some of the initiatives and rebates and things like that that would be offered. And guess what? I mean, all of these things, it ends up saving money in the long term for the state. We spend a lot of money federally and statewide on natural disaster relief, and I think that we absolutely will save money if we end up providing these additional incentives. We also need to eliminate the state incentives for solar projects that are invaluable natural and virgin lands while increasing the incentives for solar on things like rooftop and already developed lands. There has been some solar that's put into some more natural areas. We don't need to be doing that. That's bad for the climate. What we need to be doing is putting it on buildings, on rooftops, in parking lots, things like that. Enhancing the building codes, especially for any new construction, doing retrofitting. Look at contracting. State projects need to meet the goals that we're setting forth and expecting municipalities as well. We've got to practice what we preach. We need to restore trust in the team so that we can increase ridership closer to pre-pandemic levels so we have less people on the road. Support policies that promote development of transit-oriented housing. I definitely support the electrification of the T and air fleet, and promoting more biking by providing the necessary infrastructure. That is just a small portion of the things that I would support, but there are so many things that we can do, and I really think that Even though the Massachusetts General Court could be a bit divided on a lot of issues, and there are a lot of coalitions, I do think that there are a lot of encouraging things that are coming out about climate, and that with the right people in place, we can absolutely get these things done. I think there's an appetite for it, we just need more catalysts.
So 30% of our greenhouse gas emissions come from existing buildings. So we need to encourage retrofits through incentives, just as Alex was saying. And we need to use the concept of a green bank to provide funding for energy efficiency programs for the underserved communities. We need to ban new fossil fuel hookups. So thank you to the city councilors who are here for passing the electrification ordinance on Monday. And we need to increase incentives for clean energy upgrades in existing buildings. So one thing that I would propose is that we have a statewide ban, so that communities individually don't have to go through what we had to go through. In addition, I would require emission reporting from existing buildings and set targets for reduction of their greenhouse gas emissions. So again, Berto is leading the effort here with Berto. It's following Boston. It's taken years. On Monday, I guess it was 2 Mondays ago, the Zoning and Planning Committee held a public hearing, and I testified in support of it. And I also believe that residential buildings should also be included. We need to set the targets quickly, and we need to take action now. On sustainable transportation, 40% of our greenhouse gas emissions come from transportation sector. We need to increase investments to upgrade our public transportation system and expand it. We need to electrify our rail and buses and include school buses in that mix. We need to create accessible other means of travel, including more bike paths, more pedestrian trails, and pedestrian paths. We need to assist communities with electric car charging stations. That's something that we definitely need more of here in the city. And finally, I'm just going to add, because it's a little pet peeve of mine, we need to have better coordination with road construction projects. And I'm going to point to the I-90 Alston project. I am furious that the state is, at least the current plans for that, is going to include a 12-lane traffic lane. It's not going to reduce the number of lanes. It's not going to have more trees and berms to mitigate and have climate resiliency. And it's not going to have an express bus lane. Things that I think are needed if we're going to invest that many millions of dollars to clear up this road system. We need to incentivize people not to take their cars into Boston, but to take public transit.
Thank you, Bill Humphrey.
Well, as a lifelong rail enthusiast, I certainly couldn't agree more about the need to focus on more money for rail as opposed to more money for highway expansions. I think, when 70% of the emissions, as she said, come from buildings and transportation, this is where the rubber hits the road, or hopefully the metal wheels hit the metal rails. And I support the clean heat standard. I went to the recent rally that Mothers Out Front and some of the other organizations did outside the State House in support of that agenda. I'm also a big supporter of green banking, and Councilor Sangiolo just mentioned it's in my platform about creating a public banking system at the state and community level in general that can promote a lot of our policy goals with discounted financing and so forth, but in this case specifically Green New Deal construction and renovations. Obviously, I've been a very passionate advocate for the 10 Communities pilot program for electrification, including the work over the last several weeks at the City Council to make sure that it didn't get dismantled at the 11th hour. But as she just mentioned, we need to make sure that doesn't stay as a pilot and that it doesn't stay at 10 communities. It's a little bit late in the game to be doing experiments in local democracy on this stuff. That might have been good around the time of the Kyoto Protocol, but we've moved on a little bit now. We need to expand energy efficiency and clean energy programs to not only communities like ours, but also the historically underserved communities where the tax credits are not necessarily as helpful as some other mechanisms might be. And we've got a lot of bonded money authorized for fixing things up, but we have to make sure that money actually gets invested, not just authorized. Working with our labor unions, we need to be pushing a Green New Deal that renovates our existing historic housing stock and public buildings across the Commonwealth for a clean energy future and safe living and working conditions. I think today's school early releases due to struggling air conditioning systems and a heat wave are a timely reminder of how much money is going to need to be committed from the state level to help overhaul these old public buildings. And one of the most important issues for voters in our district this year and for meeting our transportation emissions goals is going to be to get the T and the rest of the state's public transit systems to reliable service. That means providing enough funding annually to support necessary hiring levels to avoid canceling trips. We need to catch up on deferred maintenance and then stay on top of our regular maintenance. And we probably also need to help restructure the debt service without cutbacks to service. We need a mass transit system that people can count on every day, because having everyone drive everywhere is obviously not feasible, and it's definitely not environmentally sustainable. And this issue is one that I've grown up with because my dad was a career public transportation planner with the state of Massachusetts. I spent all of my childhood vacations traveling around the U.S. to visit other public transit systems. And I too will be taking the T to work, and I just hope that I don't miss a key vote because the Green Line is shuttling that day. And rail electrification, obviously huge, gets the greatest number of people quickly, efficiently, with very low emissions and high efficiency. And I've also been a strong supporter of the Complete Streets agenda for biking and walking alternatives as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Rick DeBoe.
Thank you very much. It all has to do with transportation. I am really excited about Philip Eng. I feel like we have an engineer and not a politician for the first time running the show. He's doing a great job. It all comes down to funding. I will give you a little story that you may hear about because I've heard about it 3 times now. The readers for the trolley cards are not even taking money half the time. I don't know if anybody here has experienced that, but people, Martina, people have said to me, hey, I go and they just say, never mind, just get on, it's broken. If we're not collecting our fares, okay, I don't know how much they're losing there, but if we don't have a robust transportation system that can get to transportation-oriented developments, then we're not doing our job. Part of what I do in my day job is work in analyzing housing developments, and I do a lot of work for CDCs, and the Allston-Brighton CDC really is leading the way. They just took 103 of their units, and it's not easy, and it's not, and it's expensive, but they're retrofitting the 103 units. We can do this. We can do this. We have, they have put out all of the different resources to retrofit commercial buildings and residential. There are grants all over, from nationwide, from Boston, from different areas, from $25 million to a $27 billion greenhouse gas reduction fund. There's a lot of money out there. You need to work on this. You need somebody at the State House that is going to advocate, that is going to push for public-private partnerships. Everything that the 3 before me have said is in my notes that I wanted to say. But I'm adding to this a little bit extra that you may not be aware of. We can do it with our heating systems in new construction. Berto should not be for 10, it should be for how many? Is it 391 cities and towns? 350? It is a lot. We're doing it for all of them. We should do it for all of them. And the advocacy, even though the technology, and this is something that's interesting, people say it's not there yet. The technology and the cost isn't there. 6, 7 years ago, it was not possible to put a heating system in that worked below 20 degrees and didn't cost a fortune. Now the building community is saying to me, Rick, go ahead, pass that, we can do it. The people who are scared of Berto, we have until 2050 to implement. I guarantee you in 2040, 2045, the technology will be there, the cost will be down. But we don't wait. We have to push now, we have to educate now, we have to plan now before it's too late. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Greg Schwartz.
As everybody has said, transportation is a huge part of our problem, buildings as well. Together they account for 75% of our emissions of greenhouse gases. We simply will not reach our 2050 goals if we don't address these. So let's look at transportation. We need to move people out of their cars. We need to move them into EVs, onto public transport, onto buses, encourage biking and walking. As a daily T rider myself, forward to doing, but I'm already doing it. I take the T. I see how the fare cards aren't always charged. I see how the trains don't always show up. It's incredibly unreliable, and it's not rocket science. If you build it, they will come, right? So if you run a reliable, quality, and frequent enough system, people will come. So we need to invest in the T. We need to invest in the buses. We need to put back online the bus routes that were taken away. We need to create rapid bus lines so that we can create the kind of service that you get on a train at a fraction of the cost. In addition to public transportation, we need to get people into EVs. Our goal was 300,000 EVs by 2025. We're at something like 66,000 right now. So we really need to work on bringing those costs down to the extent that the state can add to the incentives that the federal government has provided. And Newton and Brookline, when it comes to the housing and the buildings, as we were talking about, that's another huge part of the problem. Newton and Brookline have done a great job, as we talked about the gas hookups, we talked about some of the other issues that, some initiatives that Newton and Brookline have taken. Well, in addition to those, we've been moving to efficiency, the solar panels on municipal buildings and schools, parking lots. They all have added to the solution because, let's face it, if you don't use energy, you don't create emissions. That's the best way to reduce emissions. Finally, the businesses that we want and the housing that we want can be created in areas that are currently not being well served by transportation. We can bring online a huge amount of additional reasonably cost housing if we have the kinds of transportation options that we need to areas of the state that are currently underserved. I would love the opportunity to dig into these issues at the state level. As I mentioned before, I'm data-driven, I'm science-focused. I will talk to experts. I know what I don't know. I will learn it from other folks. That's what I do in medicine. That's what I want to do at the State House for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. You can keep the mic. We're going to take a second to breathe again. Appreciate the thoroughness with which everyone's been answering the questions, but also keeping to the time. We'll have one more question before people wrap up. So the last question, lack of transparency in the House makes it very hard for advocates to hold their legislators accountable. Do you support the bills proposing changes such as posting committee votes on the legislature's website within 48 hours of a vote, and that hearings be scheduled 2 weeks in advance so advocates can plan for meaningful participation in the legislative hearings? Why or why not? Greg Schwartz.
Thank you. Well, the answer to those questions are all yes on my part. We definitely need to create more transparency. As someone who has advocated before the State House for my medical issues and medical societies, advocacy days, it's been extremely challenging to know what goes on with the bills that we talk to them about, where they end up, and why. So, the State House is kind of a lesson in non-transparency. In all the legislative bodies that I've worked in, I was on the City Council, as you know. I also worked for a U.S. Congressman, two U.S. Congressmen and a Senator, as well as a United Kingdom parliamentarian in the House of Commons, and all of them had better transparency than what we have. And I'm talking, this spans 25 years. So we need to have clear information, the reports of the committee, both their votes, sure, but the testimony and the decisions made need to be public. Let's throw in the public meeting law. That should be the open meeting law. That should be part of what we see at our state legislature. And I also will, as I'm trying to fill the shoes of Ruth Balzer, as I would like, I will try and I will provide the kind of feedback that she's provided to constituents through her detailed newsletter on a regular basis. And that is part of the job. You need to be transparent, and our whole legislature, where democracy, right, we like to say was born, needs to be as transparent as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Alex Duvall.
Yeah, so the answer is emphatically yes. If you look on my website, transparency is part of my platform. It's one of the things that is nearest and dearest to me. And, you know, as an auditor, as someone that, you know, business law and ethics was my second major, transparency is very important. And quite honestly, it's embarrassing where we are right now. I would exempt our legislators from Newton, but for the most part, we typically rank in the bottom 5 states for transparency. We are very bad about open records on public meeting. So, absolutely. And so there's an organization called Act on Mass. They have a pledge called the Voters Deserve to Know Pledge. I know there's another person on the stage here that has already signed it. There are only 3 candidates that have signed it so far that are not incumbents. I will be signing that this week, 100%. I will stand for recorded votes if people request them. I will push to amend the rules in order to make things more transparent, make a Commonwealth that everyone can be proud of. Quite frankly, it's very hard to get information out of the legislature unless you really show up and go and get it. And even then, you know, things are sent to study, basically purgatory for many, many years without any explanation. The way that I see it is that if elected, I mean, the position is representative. You represent a district, and people deserve to know what is happening on their behalf. So, in addition, I pledge this, that if elected, back in the day, the late Senator John McCain, who I disagree with plenty on political issues, there's one thing I really like that he did, which is he had a section on his social media and his newsletter called Behind the A's and A's. And it was on any tough vote. He always explained his reasoning behind it, and though I didn't live in Arizona at the time, his constituents, even if they disagreed with it, they know where he's coming from. Because again, the position is representative. In that case, I want everyone to know why I voted the way I did, how I voted, or if it's voice voted and there's not a recorded vote, how I would have voted. These things are important, and I think it's really vital to a thriving democracy. Lastly, I think Senator Eldridge has absolutely been on the forefront of this, and I would also co-sponsor the Sunshine Act if elected on day.
Thank you. Amy Sangiolo.
So as many of you know, transparency, accountability, and good communications is really important to me. I believe it's essential that government and elected officials not only share their votes, share their positions, but let voters know exactly where they stand on issues. In 2015, I started an e-newsletter to make sure that residents of Newton know what their city councilors were doing, what their boards and commissions were doing, and what the school committee was discussing, and how they voted. I published their reports to make sure that everybody had that at their fingertips. I remember one of my colleagues said at the time, "Why do you waste your time doing that? All of that information is up on the website." I'm hearing the same thing from state legislators, that all of that stuff is all on the website. Has anyone tried to look at the website there? I am a data nerd, and I can't find stuff not only on the state website, but also even here today on the city website. I think it's vital that information on votes, information on how they voted in committee, and not just the votes that we posted, but also committee reports. Because as Alex was alluding to, it's really important to understand what those trade-offs were that were made in committee as they're making their decisions. We don't know why people decided to abstain from a vote in committee, but then suddenly switched their vote and decided to either be pro or against an item when it comes to for the final vote. In addition, there was a question about the 2-week requirement on hearings. I think this is essential essential. As a former advocate working on John Kerry's bill in Washington, D.C., and as somebody who's testified on bills before our state legislatures, it's really important to know exactly when those bills are coming up so that you have the opportunity to prepare, gather the data, gather the information so that you can inform your legislature on what they are taking up. The only exception I would make are for emergency provisions and the need to have emergency hearings or something that's, an urgent issue that you can't predict. Thank you.
They're going to Bill Humphrey.
So I'm also in support, as I think everyone is saying they are, of the specific questions at hand here about posting the committee votes within 48 hours and scheduling the hearings 2 weeks in advance. Short notice and surprise scheduling of the hearings are extremely limiting for public participation, and I think that's especially key to understand when it comes to the environmental agenda. We don't want hearings to just be dominated by professional advocates and lobbyists who happen to know a committee chair. We also know firsthand that if stuff comes up as kind of a surprise and there's not enough time to mobilize the public on the environmental issues, we do not get the results that we expected from our elected officials. We just saw that with the recent near miss on the electrification ordinance situation here. And another transparency point is that legislators simply need more time to review legislation and amendment text. We don't get good legislation out of a mad scramble over a few days, and there's no reason that it has to be done this way. They've wasted 18 months of this term, now they're trying to do everything all at once. We're not going to get good outcomes from that overall. Committee votes should of course be public at the State House just as they are at the Newton City Council, so I definitely also support the Sunlight Act from Senator Eldridge to improve legislative transparency. But another point that I wanted to make is that I think it's a little easy in this type of environment to say that you're going to support these things. We have to understand that traditionally leadership has come down pretty hard on anybody who has said they are for this. So you do need to ask yourself who you think has the record and temperament to be going up against leadership when it counts on some of these things, and who's going to be pushing back in private on some of these points. I think also communications, as some others have mentioned, are absolutely key. I'm certainly someone that's had an existing newsletter since before I was even on the city council, and very reliably putting out information in my own ward. And also I think answering constituents promptly, which is very important. And obviously people know that I'm very into door knocking directly to talk to as many voters as possible. It's something I've been doing for many, many years. And it's important to ground yourself in the community in that way to be able to take some of these more controversial votes. And I think the other thing to be keeping in mind here when it comes to transparency issues is that we are the ones that are getting elected. So while you can use staff to help you do the job, you cannot outsource all of the functions of the job to your staff. So you have to actually be available to do the job. Thank you.
Thank you. Rick Lebow.
Thank you very much. I've always been a transparent person. I prioritize transparency and accountability. I will always advocate for more. At the State House, I pledge to report my votes on a weekly or monthly newsletter, whichever one is going to not annoy people the most. But I promise to keep people in the loop and be looking at all of the votes. I want to get to the State House so I can potentially help modernize with openness from within, while at the same time gathering the tools to be successful in bringing resources and positive policies to our district. Bill is absolutely right about something. We all want more transparency. We all don't think things work the right way. But he mentioned that leadership will come down on you quite hard if you go up there kicking and screaming about it. I would like to go up there talking about it, supporting more transparency, but we all have to understand that when you go into, as a first-term state rep, when you go into that pool, it is built that way. You need political acumen, you need relationship skills, you need building bridges in order to affect any change. This is the change that we want, but there's nuance and a way to go and get it in the end. So I agree with Bill that if you go kicking and screaming, you'll end up in the basement with one assistant for the rest of the attendant. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick.
Take a breath.
Take a breath. I am wondering, Peter, if we could, on the fly, give people a little bit more time for their final statement. It looks to me like we could go ahead and give them 3 minutes for their final statement if they would like. Okay, yeah, and I know you didn't prepare for that, but given that we have the time, I think it is appropriate for you to have a chance to have any further comments, if you'd like. We're going to start with Rick, the buff, and we'll go from there.
Thank you. Thank you for holding this forum. Just to close, fighting climate change will always be at the forefront of my work. As your state representative, I have a record for getting things done. My colleagues can attest to that, and several in this room who inform me every day, Dan Rubin, Kathy Pillsbury, Lisa Monahan, endorsers of mine, that I lean on for education and for value in where we're going and what we should be doing with greening our state, greening our world. Transportation, housing, climate have got to be taken together. I can't talk about one without the other. Knocking on over 4,000 doors now, I'd say it's in the top two, climate and housing. And when we talk about it, transportation is thrown in, and it has been the most robust conversations on the door. It's in the forefront of everybody's mind. Just what's happening in our country, the cost of this. The governor now has created a fund. We need a fund to deal with the disasters. Cities and towns are getting turned away by FEMA. And we have got to come up with a whole new fund to deal with these disasters when they happen. I want to ask you all something, and especially the three organizations who are hosting this tonight. I want to ask whether you will meet with me quarterly or biannually as your state representative. I will request meetings to help me build my climate priorities, to walk together on this urgent path to a healthier and more sustainable world. I hope I have the opportunity to do that with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Greg Schwartz.
Thank you very much for holding this forum. I think it's been very informative, and I think that the participation is a clear demonstration of how important these issues are. As we've all said, climate change is an existential threat to our existence on this planet. It's our biggest challenge, and it's complex with many facets. As I've mentioned before, I'm a problem solver. That's my job, has been for 20 years as a physician, 8 years as a city councilor, and with my law background, I want to bring that to the policymaking arena so that we can make policies that actually have the effect that we intend. Too many times policies have not thought far enough into the future and have had unintended consequences. We saw this with the tobacco companies, which I alluded to when I worked many years ago on tobacco control. For many, many years, the tobacco companies who had been forced to have warning labels on their ads and on their packs used that. We thought it was such a public health benefit, but they used that as a way to shield themselves from liability. And they were 100% successful. It was really only when there was a new strategy that came out because of the fraud that was revealed when their internal documents were released by a whistleblower that we were able to get the purchase on them and were able to force the tobacco settlements. I got my law degree and I got into policy because of these experiences, fighting well-heeled interests that did not feel that they had to answer for their profit motive that put people's lives and health at risk. And the utilities, while public in some way, they are fighting and they are not coming along and we need to hold their feet to the fire. And I want to be part of that. I want to use the experiences that I've had both in law, legislative work, and in medicine. And the final thing I would say is all of us who have children or grandchildren know that the world that we leave needs to be better than what we have gotten. It's a shanda, it's a catastrophe that we have despoiled our planet, put human and all of our fellow creatures' health at risk, and if we're at all responsible adults, we should be taking every effort we can to fight climate change and global warming. I want to be part of that. Thank you for your attention. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Greg. Alex Fitzgerald.
So I think it's kind of been said already. Climate really touches every part of our lives, and I think basically every part of our platforms, right? Like, you know, housing, healthcare, education, it really does touch on everything. It's one of the only things that I can think of that really does hit on every other major priority that I have on my campaign. So, what would maybe be a good addition to the State House? Again, as a progressive, I think we need more people with finance background and with oversight background. What are the two of the main functions of the legislature? It is the power to purse and appropriations, so the annual budget, as well as oversight. That's what I've spent my career in, and I would hope to be able to bring to the public office. I'd be able to bring money for the climate, be able to provide that oversight to make sure that climate goals are met, as well as the money that's being spent on it is being spent efficiently, effectively, and is being, once again, that we are meeting our goals. I absolutely would commit to working with, hand in hand with whoever won politicians as well, just like Ruth and Kay have been such great partners over the years in bringing so much great money back to Newton and really advocating together and really have been just such a powerful team. I would hope to do the same thing here. We need a changing of the guard. I think that there's been a lot of status quo. It's old boys club kind of at the top there on Beacon Hill, and I think that it's a 160-person body, but every single incremental change that we make is worth it because, as I said earlier, it's a 5-alarm fire out there with climate. The time to act was a long time ago, so we really, really need to fight for it now. Thank you, and I ask you to vote on something.
Thank you, Alex. Amy Sangiolo.
Thank you again for hosting this forum, and thank you all for being here on this very hot night. As I said earlier, I think it's clear that we need to take bold and aggressive action to combat the climate crisis. I will bring my extensive experience in environmental advocacy, my proven effectiveness in getting things done in the legislative process, my years of experience delivering excellent constituent service, my demonstrated commitment to working inclusively with stakeholders through community engagement, and I will continue to provide good communication and transparency as your next state representative. Most of all, I pledge to be your partner and your champion on all things green. My name is Amy Sangiolo, and I'm running for state rep, and I ask for your vote and your support on September 3rd and November 5th. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Bill Humphrey.
I'm Newton City Councilor Bill Humphrey. I'm asking for your support on September 3rd in the Democratic primary in the 12th Middlesex District. Unapologetically bold climate action has always been my political mission in public service long before this race. A Green New Deal is the only positive path forward for our society. And with vested interests, we know there's not going to be any way to get there without fighting. So I would encourage you to elect a fighter. I have the only track record in this race of working extensively with advocacy groups and coalitions, both inside and outside of public office. And those relationships and that approach are reflected in my growing number of endorsements from progressive state-level organizations who work with the legislature, such as Progressive Massachusetts and Mass Alliance, and many of the labor unions. These issues are not ones that I just discovered while running for this office. I've been at all of your rallies and part of your organizations for many, many years now. The Massachusetts House of Representatives has been blockading Governor Healy's climate agenda, and we need something other than business as usual at this point in the House. I have a proven willingness to stand up for what I believe is right, no matter what kind of pressure I'm put under, and a willingness to bring advocates and the grassroots into the process. That is the only way to get things done on an issue that often gets brushed aside, because elected officials are more afraid of the polluters than the cost of inaction. I encourage you to visit billhumphrey.org, learn more about me, and support my candidacy before September 3rd. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you all candidates.